Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Comics the Gathering. It's your host Jesse, as always. We're going to be going through another Commander 2020 deck tech today. Today we are going over the Ruthless Regiment deck. That is going to be the Human Tribal deck. And this deck is probably one of my favorite. I seem to gravitate towards Mardu, aristocrats, aggro strategies for some reason. I don't know why. Probably because this deck inevitably is very similar to the Mardu vampire deck that's led by Soren Markov. That deck tech is also on my channel if you want to check it out. But this plays in a very reminiscent way. Early game human aggro strategy, and later devolving in the late game to burn damage through aristocrats strategy. So without further ado, let's jump into the deck tech, go over some of my card choices, what's included in the deck. For a large portion of this, most of it was kept fairly the same. Just the obvious upgrades were made. So I might do a more in-depth look at this, but right now, when I get the deck, I plan on making these upgrades to the deck. So let's start with the commander, which is Jarina Kudrow, which is the daughter of General Kudrow, and also a lot of people, with the lore being so wonky for this set, is actually also Luca, the Planeswalker. This is his girlfriend, betrothed, female companion to be. So that's interesting. Interesting that she's not in the main set, that she's in the commander product, but here she is as our commander. So she is a 3/3 for 1 red, white, black human soldier, and when she enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 human soldier creature token for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. Other humans you control get +2 +0. So if she keeps, like, the more and more you're casting her, the more and more humans you get for her coming back. Which again, you're going wide. Which again, you're going wide, and that's one of the strategies of this deck. Just, wide, aggro, pump the team, get in, close it out, try to kill people as quickly as possible. So, that being said, let's jump into the deck itself. We have Adriana, Captain of the Guard, for 3 red, white. You get a 4/4 human knight with melee, and other creatures you control have melee. Melee reads that whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked with a creature this turn. So basically, this just lets your whole team pump up real big by swinging at all your opponents. So again, this is a very crucial card to the deck. You want to get this card as early and as quickly as possible. Next we have Alicia, who smiles at death. For 2 and a red, you get a legendary creature, Human Warrior, 3/2 with first strike. Whenever she attacks, you may pay hybrid white-black, hybrid white-black. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. So obviously, your little humans are going to get killed. Alicia is going to be able to, for a little mana investment, you're going to be able to snag those back and keep the engine going. Banisher Priest, 1 white-white for a 2/2. When Banisher Priest enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Banisher Priest leaves the battlefield. So, comes down, gets you some spot removal on a human body. Bounty Agent, for 1 and a white, you get a 2/2 with Vigilance. You can also tap and sacrifice Bounty Agent to destroy target legendary permanent that's an artifact, creature, or enchantment. Captivating Crew. For 3 and a red, you get a 4/3 human pirate that also has, for 3 and a red, gain control of target creature and opponent controls until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So, little way to take your opponent's best creatures or key blockers and get them out of the way so you can get in for your big attack. Next we have one of the few non-human creatures that are in the deck. That's a Cavalry Pegasus. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/1 flyer, but whenever it attacks, each attacking human gains flying until end of turn. So, nice little way to make your humans a lot more evasive. Up next, another non-human that synergizes well, though, is Dearly Departed. For 4 white, you get a 5/5 flying spirit, and as long as Dearly Departed is in your graveyard, each human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So, a nice big flying threat, and if your opponent kills it, then guess what? All of your humans are going to enter just a little bit better. Next, we have Devout Chaplain. For 2 and a white, you get a 2/2 human cleric that you can tap, and tap 2 untapped humans you control to exile target artifact or enchantment. So, again, focuses on the humans all working together, coming together to dispel evil in the form of getting rid of an enchantment on a place or a horrible artifact. So, really like that. Up next, we have Disciple of Bolas. For 3 and a black, you get a 2/1 human wizard that when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's powerful. So, this gets into more of the aristocrat strategy of the deck, but it's also a way to just net some card draw off of a creature that maybe can't attack anymore. If for some reason it can't get in, doesn't have favorable blocks, turn it into card draw. Then we have my boy, the card that is subsequently wrecking Commander because it says your opponent can't cast their commander. That's Draneth Magistrate. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/3 human wizard. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So it turns off all the graveyard synergies of your opponents being able to cast things maybe out of the graveyard. And also, your opponents can't cast their commander. Up next, we have Frontline Warmonger. For 3 and a red, you get a 4/4 human warrior. Whenever 1 or more creatures attack one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, those creatures gain menace until end of turn. So, again, another decently sized human body that is going to be giving your team menace. So I really like that. Frontline Medic. For 2 and a white, you get a 3/3 human cleric that has Battalion. So whenever Frontline Medic and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And you can sacrifice Frontline Medic, counter target spell with X in its mana cost unless its controller pays 3. So, weird little counterspell ability on Frontline Medic, very restrictive, but he does do that. But more importantly, it's the giving indestructible to everything when he attacks with at least 2 other creatures. That is really, really good on our aggro plan. Next we have Fumiko the Lowblood. For 2 red, you get a 3/2 legendary creature, Human Samurai. Fumiko the Lowblood has Bushido X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Whenever this creature blocks or becomes blocked, it gets +X/+X until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able. So, you slam down your Fumiko, pass the turn, all your opponent's stuff has to attack, and the more creatures they have attacking, the bigger Fumiko is as a blocker, so you're able to, if they are swinging at you, you can kill their key pieces, or this is kind of like a weird goad, where then if they don't want to, risk that blowout, They then swing at the opponents. And then the same thing with Fumiko is after all your opponents are tapped down, you can get in for the big attack. And if they try to block her, she gets huge. So really like this card. Good plays you can make with it. Up next we have Garner the Bloodflame. 3 black-red, 3/3 with flash human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, you're going to return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from anywhere this turn. Other creatures you control have haste. So, your opponent wraths, boom, slam in a Garner the Bloodflame after the wrath, get back all your creatures. You have the line of you get in for your big attack, your opponent has the blowout, they're able to, block accordingly, or they are able to, maybe with a Vidalcan Orrery flash in a Wrath or something during your turn, boom, you have Garner the Bloodflame on back up to net everything back. Really like her, great utility creature in this deck. Obviously, one of the most important add-ins you can do is to add in your commander's dad, and that's General Kudro of Draneth. For 1 white-black, you get a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier. Other humans you control get +1/+1. And whenever General Kudro or another human enters the battlefield under your control, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. So, get a nice little control on the graveyard. And then also, you can pay 2, sacrifice 2 humans, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So then you can turn all your little human tokens into ways to remove big threats, and then your remaining large humans can go ahead and get in to close out the game. Also, General's Enforcer. For a white and a black, you get a 2/3 creature human soldier. Legendary humans you control have indestructible, so that makes the General and his daughter, along with some of the other named people we're playing, Adriana, Alicia, Fumiko, Garna, those are all now indestructible while he's chilling on the board. Also keep in mind that for 2 white-black, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So again, more ways to control your opponent's graveyard while also netting you a larger human army that you can then turn around to feed into General Kudro or go wide with, or whatever you need to do. Judith the Scourge Diva. Nice little human addition that other creatures you control get +1/+0, so again, contributing to our aggro plan. 2/2 body for 3 mana, and then whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. So while, yes, all your little human tokens don't net you the triggers if your opponent is wiping out your actual, human creatures that you're casting and putting mana into, they're going to take a little bit of a crackback for that. So, plus, again, the nice little power pump is great. Combine that with General Kudro, you're looking at a +2/+1 pump, and that's really good. Up next, we have our obligatory ramp in creature form, which is Knight of the White Orchid. For double white, you get a 2/2 first striking human knight riding some sort of weird hooved lion. And when Knight of the White Orchid enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a Plains card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Keep in mind that that is anything with the Plains subtype as well. So, Shocklands, and more importantly, your new Triome, are all nettable off of Knight of the White Orchid. Up next, we have Magus of the Disc. So that's going to be 2 white, 2/4. It enters the battlefield tapped, but it's literally a Nevinral's Disc on a creature. So you can pay 1, tap it, and destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So at any given point, it's the same as holding a Nev's Disc over your opponent's head. They have to think about how they interact with you because you have your finger on the nuke button, basically. And it's going to slow down their board progression, but you can just keep playing into it and being like, okay, well, I'm going to keep trying to kill you guys, and if you try to stop me, I'm going to blow everything up. So it's a really, really great tool to have. Also, speaking of Magus, we have a Magus of the Wheel for 2 and a red. You get a 3/3 that has, you can pay 1 and a red, tap, and sacrifice Magus of the Wheel. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. It's a Wheel of Fortune on a creature, and also a nice way to refuel after you run out all your humans and you're out of gas because you're an aggro deck. You just go, okay, pop Magus of the Wheel. Everybody gets a refresh. Maybe you discard some key cards out of your opponent's hand. They flood out on lands. Maybe they don't. It's kind of wonky there, but you get to refresh your hand, which is the most important thing. Audric Master Tactician for 2 white. You get a 3/4 legendary creature human soldier with first strike, and whenever Audric Master Tactician, and at least 3 other creatures attack, you may choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. So basically, if you don't want your opponent to block and you just want to get in for raw damage, boom, you got there. If you want to make their utility creatures block unfavorably so you can kill them, boom, you got that. Fantastic, fantastic card right there. Up next, we have Ravos Soul Tender. For 3 white/black, you get a 2/2 legendary creature, human cleric with flying. Other creatures you control get +1/+1, so again, pumping your team. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So, nice little inclusion in the deck. It's going to recur your humans, pump your team. Fantastic, fantastic. And plus, he's evasive. Riders of Gavany. For 2 white, you get a 3/3 creature human knight with vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Human creatures you control have protection from creatures of the chosen type. So, if your opponent is also on a tribal strategy, you can hose that tribal strategy as well. Even if it's the mirror, you can be like, oh, I'm playing against another humans deck. Okay, my humans have pro-humans. Oh no! So, obviously this matches up well against people who are playing vampires, elves, merfolk, some sort of tribal strategy, goblins. But even if it's just so you can get through on a couple, incidental creatures that have common types that are on the battlefield amongst your opponents. Another set that we have here is our partner pair for this set. We have Silvar, Devourer of the Free. With 3 black/red, you get a 4/2 legendary creature, Cat Nightmare. It partners with Trin, Champion of Freedom. It has Menace, and you may sacrifice a human to put a +1/+1 counter on Silvar, Devourer of the Free. It gains indestructible until end of turn. So then, of course, let's look at Trin real quick. Trin, Champion of Freedom, partners with Silvar, Devourer of the Free. And at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So, Trin keeps feeding Silvar. Silvar keeps getting bigger and indestructible, so he can keep attacking. And then Trin gets to feed him again. So, fantastic, fantastic little synergistic pair. Great way to close out games. Probably one of the best cards in the entire deck that is also a new card, Species Specialist. For 2 black/black, you get a 2/3 human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card. Now, obviously, if you plan on, aggressively removing your opponent's creatures, you could name that. Or, more importantly, if you end up in a situation where you're doing more of the aristocrats thing, you just name human. And so then each time one of your humans dies because you're sacrificing it for value, you're drawing cards. Really, really good. Fantastic card. Thalia's Lieutenant. Glad they included this in the deck. One of the linchpins of human strategies for a long while now. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/1 that when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. And then whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. So it comes in, it pumps your entire team, and then each subsequent human makes it bigger to become this massive, unstoppable threat. Thalia, Heretic Cathar is one of my choice additions to the deck. For 2 and a white, you get a 3/2 first strike. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Commander is almost inherently always a multi-color format. So you're going to slow down your opponent's progression a lot because suddenly most of their lands are coming in tapped, as well as their creatures. Blind Obedience can be devastating. Blind Obedience, when your opponent, it's also hitting your opponent's non-basic lands, can outright just win you the game in momentum. So I felt this was a necessary inclusion. Another new card that's in this deck that I can't wait to play around with and see if I'm fond of it is Titan Hunter. For 4 and a black, you get a 4/5 human warrior creature. At the beginning of each player's end step, if no creatures died this turn, Titan Hunter deals 4 damage to that player. You can pay 2, sacrifice a creature, and you gain 4 life. So you have a way to appease the hunter so you don't take the damage, but then you're forcing your opponents who are maybe dirtling to either make unfavorable attacks, play removal in ways they don't want to, or just slowly get eaten away at 4 damage per turn. So I do like the inevitability that card ends until your opponents have to answer it. Titan of Eternal Fire is 5 and a red for, again, one of the few non-humans. It's a giant. It's also 5/6, which is, I think, the biggest threat in the entire deck, but it grants each human creature you control the ability to pay a red and tap it to deal 1 damage to any target, which is, of course, going to play out in the late game when you're just trying to close out the game, and you have a bunch of humans that can't attack. So that's one way to weaponize them. Up next, we have Verge Rangers. For 2 and a white, you get a 3/3 human scout with first strike. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and as long as an opponent controls more lands than you, you may play lands from the top of your library. So obviously, this will pair well with anything that you can use to manipulate the top of the deck, but also, again, it's like a continuous so it's like a continuous Knight of the White Orchid almost, but you're not restricted to it being plains, you're restricted to it being the top card of your deck and your opponent having more lands than you. So, Don't Hate This card can really help you keep up when you're not drawing your lands as well. Up next we have Zathrid Necromancer. For 2 and a black, you get a 2/2 whenever Zathrid Necromancer or another human creature you control dies. Create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. Obviously, your entire deck is human. Obviously, they're going to die. Now that you have the Necromancer, each time one of them dies, you can subsequently collect a 2/2 zombie to, recur the value. So that's a really, really nice addition. Also, Zulaport Cutthroat is going to be our final creature. For 1 and a black, you get a 1/1 human rogue ally that whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So again, adding to the aristocrats strategy. Next, we're going to move on to enchantments. Bastion of Remembrance from Ikoria is really nice here. For 2 and a black, you get an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. And then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. More Zulaport Cutthroat, basically, but in enchantment form, so it's going to be a little bit harder to remove. Up next, probably one of my favorite additions is Etchings of the Chosen. For 1 white-black, when as Etchings of the Chosen enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can pay 1, sacrifice a creature of the chosen type. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. So a nice way to protect your legendary humans by sacrificing your 1/1 human tokens. Molten Echoes is a enchantment that costs 2 red. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, and you exile at the beginning of the next end step. So obviously, a great little way to just get in some more aggro attacks. There's a couple things you can do where you can take advantage of things, but also this doesn't make non-legendary tokens, so unfortunately your legendary humans are going to not be able to be duplicated, but like a Thalia's Lieutenant is really nice because you're going to pump the rest of your team again, and you just have some nice little synergies like that. Outpost Siege. For 3 and a red, you get to choose either cons or dragons. If you pick cons at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. If you're going to pick dragons, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to any target. So you can either get another aristocrat style trigger, or you can get some card advantage by exiling the top card of your library and then gaining the ability to play that for that turn. Sanctuary Lockdown. For 2 and a white, humans you control get +1/+1. You can also pay 2 and tap 2 untapped humans you control to tap target creature and opponent controls. Not quite as good as General Kudro, but it is a way to tap down your opponent's stuff so you can get in with your bigger creatures. Shared Animosity. For 2 and a red, you get an enchantment that whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. The majority of your stuff is human. You can see how this gets out of control. And our final enchantment is going to be Vigilante Justice. For 3 and a red, whenever a human enters the battlefield under your control, Vigilante Justice deals 1 damage to any target. So it's almost like a human exclusive impact tremors that costs more. So you could, in theory, you could also put an impact tremors in here, or you could replace this with impact tremors, depending on how you wanted to take it. But I like the flavor of this card, so I left it in as is. If you see something you want to remove to add impact tremors, by all means go ahead. And then you have 2 of those, and that's just more ways to close out the game. Like, I left the Commander Sphere in here. Maybe you don't want as many mana rocks as I'm playing. Cut that. Add in impact tremors. Easy, easy trade. Also, Perforos can fit in here. Both versions fit nicely, along with the newest Erebos can also fit in here. So those are other cards to consider. Build, maybe as I take time to play with this deck and refine it, those cards will find room in the deck. Moving on to artifacts for mana rocks. Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Orzhov Signet, Rakdos Signet. All of these are included in the deck, which is fantastic. Along with a Commander Sphere. Again, you can drop this card really easily to add in like an Impact Tremors or something like that. No the mana curve on this deck is fairly low. So you want to be able to play all your stuff, but you don't want to flood out with this deck either. More importantly, though, Door of Destinies is really important in this deck. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on it. So this is the card that lets your humans get runaway huge. This is the card that's going to turn your 1/1 human tokens into like 4/4s, 5/5s in the late game. So this is probably the single most important artifact in your entire deck. Then we have an Heirloom Blade. It's a 3-mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+1. Whenever equipped creature dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card that shares a creature type with it. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, equipped for 1. So I like this because it's going to give a nice boost to your creatures, and then inevitably when your opponent does answer them, you get a replacement human from your deck anyhow. So, and then you can just stick this on somebody else. So I like that a lot. Icon of Ancestry from M20 seems really good in here. It's a 3-mana artifact. Enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can pay 3 to tap it. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card of the chosen type from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's netting you card filtration. It's pumping your team. Like, there's nothing here not to like for this deck. Deck also comes with a Skull Clamp. Why wouldn't it? You make a bunch of 1/1 human creature tokens. You're gonna clamp them, draw cards, get the clamps. So really, really good there. And then finally, Vanquisher's Banner is really important. For 5 mana, you get an artifact that when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1, and whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. So obviously that adds up over time. More card draw keeps you churning through your deck, getting more humans. Moving on to sorceries, we're playing an Ambitions cost. For 3 and a black, you get a sorcery that says you draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. Plain and simple. What are humans if not ambitious? And this is the cost of that ambition, but we're going to get those 3 cards. We don't mind that little bit of loss of life. Citywide Bust is probably one of the best wraths, because a lot of your humans are small. So you're destroying all creatures with toughness 4 or greater can actually sweep away your opponent's board, but leave your stuff mostly intact. Obviously, in the late game, this gets a little worse, but opponents who start out the gate with, a pretty sizable board of big creatures. This is a great way to get them under control. Another great way to get them under control is Cleansing Nova. For 3 white, you get a sorcery that says choose 1, destroy all creatures, or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Obviously, tons of flexibility in this card, letting you go after not only creature-heavy boards, but also if your opponents have a bunch of debilitating artifacts and enchantments, it's a great way to reset everything. Just be like, no. Let's dial all that back in. Really screw over the Enchantress or Brea player at the table. So, absolutely love that. Increasing Devotion for 3 white, you get a sorcery that says create 5 1/1 white human creature tokens. But it also flashes back for 7 white. So for 9, you can flash it back, and if you do, you get 10 of those tokens instead. So really good. Also, a wrath that doesn't affect you is Kindred Dominance is really nice as well. Choose a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't of the chosen type. Being a tribal deck, that is really important. We also get to run Painful Truths in here. We're a 3-color deck. It's basically another Ambitions cost, but it's 1 less mana. So I like how that works out. And then, of course, Ruinous Ultimatum. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. Why would you not want this? Just rain down hellfire on your opponents. They don't have their stuff, and then your humans just march on in and conquer, as they do. For instance, we're playing Call the Coppercoats. So for 2 and a white, you get an instant with Strive. This spell costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target opponents. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures that those opponents control. So a great way to quickly amass an army. Even just for 3 mana, this can easily be 5, 6, 7, 8 creatures. So especially if you're against another go wide deck, like Elves or Chulane or something like that. This is just playing a lot of creatures really quickly. Great way to buff your board up. Crackling Doom for those who are playing against people who have more of a less wide style and more of a Voltron. You've got Crackling Doom to go red, white, black, instant. Deal 2 damage to each opponent, and then each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. So you're usually hitting your opponent's best creature, and you're going to get to dumb them for 2, and it's all of your opponents. Dire Tactics is probably one of the least restrictive removal spells. It was on flavor, and you can find other things to play it that are probably better, but for how cheap of a card this is, and the fact that you're almost always going to have a human, so that you don't have to lose life equal to that creature's toughness that you kill with Dire Tactics, perfectly fine. Also, Terminate to get rid of any target creature. It can't be regenerated. Feels pretty good too. That being said, that's going to bring us to our last instant, which is Flawless Maneuver. Obviously, if you have a Teferi's Protection, find room for it in here. I know it is down in price, but it still is an expensive card right now. And Flawless Maneuver is basically the fixed Teferi's Protection. It's not nearly as broken, but you do get to cast it for free if you control your commander. And it just says creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So that's really, really good. It's a great way to, you know, if you have your commander out and, you know, you have a wide board and you tap out to make sure everything's, you know, solid and ready to go, it's a great way to make sure you're protected. That being said, there are a few lands to talk about that I think are really important. Castle Ardenvel from Eldraine is really, really good in here because it's literally, you can pay 2 white, tap it, and create a 1/1 human creature token. It gives you constant, steady stream of more reinforcements for your army, along with also Castle Embereth from Eldraine, which is just another way to pump your team when you're swinging in, that you can just stick into your mana base for 1 red and tapping that land. So all your stuff getting +1/+0 until end of turn is really good. The big land upgrade that I think would put this deck over the top is Cavern of Souls. You know, making it so that you have a rainbow land that fixes for your creature type, and you are a tribal deck that also makes it so anything cast with Cavern of Souls mana is uncounterable, is really nice. And then the final land that I think is super important is Westvale Abbey. You're already making a lot of humans. This land does make more humans, but then most importantly, it gives you a win con in your lands that you can sacrifice those humans, maybe get some of your other synergistic triggers there, but then you also get Ormondal, and you just get to wreck people with a giant 9/7 flying indestructible lifelink haste demon. It's absolutely bonkers. Probably one of my favorite lands ever printed by Wizards. I love Westvale Abbey. So that's going to be the deck. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it here to the end, comment down below and let me know you made it to the end. But what do you think of the deck? What's your opinion? What would you do differently? I know a couple things that I'm going to tweak around and play with, but this is my current build. And again, all these builds were designed before the physical decks were ever released to us, before we could even play with them. So I'm sure over time I want better upgrades for these, but I got to get them in my hands. I got to play around with them and see how they work, and, you know, make mental notes and be like, oh, there's this interaction. So, but that being said, thank you guys for watching. Have a nice day, and we will see you on our next video. Peace.